Hi everybody. I want to talk about end sheets in this video and probably one more because end sheets are important and they serve a lot of purposes, and it helps if you have some options. So these are the three end paper sections that I personally have found most useful for the work I do over the years. And so I wanted to, hopefully this will, there she goes, this will be useful. First I want to talk about why end sheets, because you could obviously sew a book up, go ahead and treat it, and then just build your case and paste down the outermost leaf at the front and the back, and it's done. I've seen that done, and it's not really a good idea, because if the book ever has to come apart or it deteriorates, the outermost leaves are part of, the text block. And so the text block is compromised if something happens to it. The outermost leaf is conjugate to, the outermost, the other outer leaf of that signature, and it just makes for more problems than you really want to get into. So by adding an end paper section, you can, the end paper section is essentially sacrificial. So if the book has to come apart, you can cut the end sheet, the text block remains intact. In case binding, the case and the text block are held together by the paste down, so by the end sheet. And even though it seems kind of flimsy when you do something like this, which is just a single folio, which most machine bindings are, even a relatively, and this is air quotes, relatively weak structure like the folded single folio, can last 50 or 100 years. So it's all relative. This is, as I say, the single folio, which I tend to use on smaller books. This is about a 4-signature text block. Not got a lot of weight to it. Case binding. So this is conjugate paste down and flyleaf. It has to be, tipped on a little bit, so sometimes it will lift the outermost leaf a little bit when it opens, but it's not, you've got some arch there anyway. This is the most straightforward end paper section, and again, for a lot of things, it's perfectly appropriate. Now, the other thing that I should mention is that in general, I tend not to put new end sheets on conservation bindings. If the original fly and paste down are still extant, I prefer to use those and to work within those constraints. I don't like to, take an older book, pull it out of the case, tip a folio on, and then slap that over the original paste down. That makes my teeth itch, quite frankly, and I just don't think it's best practice. It's personal, and it's probably arguable. But in that case, I would do something different, and I probably should address that at some point. If somebody's interested, let me know in the comments. But anyway, so for new work, a single tipped folio on a smallish book is quite appropriate. All right. You go a little bit bigger, still a case binding. All right, this is a heftier book. This is about 6-8 signatures maybe. This is kind of my even more go-to end paper. This is a folio in a single sheet. So what you get is paste down and 2 fly leaves. This is a sewn end sheet. You can see the sewing. All right. So the end sheet is sewn with the text block, which makes it really strong. And then again, the case and the text block are joined by the paste down. There's also, which I will show you this, an integral Japanese paper hinge strip for a little added strength. And this is all wrapped around and tipped so that when you sew, which is you're going to sew through here, you're sewing through 3 layers of paper. So you've got some extra reinforcement there, which is very useful down the road. Okay, and the other thing about this end sheet is if you chose, which occasionally I've done and you might want to do, is you can actually either use this hinge as a visible hinge with a separate paste down, in which case you get 3 fly leaves, or you could replace this with a thin strip of leather paired along the edge here and a waste sheet, and then you've got a potential for using this for a leather binding, in which case the nice thing about this, because this is the single sheet, you could take a sheet of paper, do a decorated paper on it, and then you've got a decorated paste down front fly. When you do these, you always have to be careful with the backside, because if you get crap on, if you get marks on the backside of the fly leaf, then it can be difficult to, then it could look bad if you can see that. All right, so this is kind of my all-purpose end sheet. And in fact, if you get a chance, if you ever have a chance to take a look at Philip Smith's New Directions in Bookbinding, he has a couple of pages of diagrams of end sheets, and actually this is one that he seemed to like a lot too. So again, folio and a single sheet, Japanese paper or leather hinge. Finally, we've got the classic zigzag end sheet, which gives you a leather joint and 4 fly leaves. And it's got a kind of a funky little, gusset. I was going to say grommet. It's a funky little grommet there. A fussy little gusset there. This is kind of the other end. This is here are your 2 ends of the spectrum here. This is for a book like this, where you've got a leather joint, separate paste down, plenty of fly leaves to bring you into the text block. Okay, so this is the most, it's not terribly complicated, but this is the most complicated of these 3. The disadvantage to the zigzag, other than the time it takes to make it, is that it is, by its nature, by the structure of it, it's all going to be one color. This is not a structure that makes it easy to have a decorated fly leaf. You could certainly, if you wanted to, do either a decorated paste down or a doublure. That's a personal thing. I don't do doublures because that's just my personal thing, but there's no rule not to do it. So there are those. Now the question becomes, why end papers at all? As I said before, the end paper buffers the text block and protects it in any number of ways. It joins the case binding into, to the text block. It buffers the text block so that when you pull the book, when somebody has to pull the book down the road, the text block stays intact. And of course you can add, it can be a design, another aspect of the design. Okay, so that's why end sheets, and these are the end sheets I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to show you how to do. And since I figure what I would do is just show you the first one, because it's really straightforward. Then we'll call it quits, and I will, in the next video, I'll do the other 2. So a single folio. Notes. No notes. Okay, so this is sheet of paper. You always want your end sheets to be larger than the the text block. You want to make your end sheets and trim it to size. Don't try and make it the same size. You will regret it. Grain always runs parallel to the spine. This is, if you want your book to last, this is a foundational principle. You always want the paper to expand this way. If it expands this way, it's going to give you trouble down the road. Maybe not you, but some poor sod. Okay, so grain runs parallel to spine, and then this is, you know, bigger than the signature unfolded. So you just fold it down, okay, match up the edges, do an initial crease, come back. You don't even need to fuss with that. Hit it with your folder. There's your end sheet. Bingo. Here is, now the question is, when do you put it on? I tend, so here's a signature. This happens to be too small, but that's okay. Again, this is just an example. So I would, good, not good. Okay, I would normally tip this style of end sheet onto the signature after marking up and cutting my sewing stations. All right. You don't want to do it before, because if you, depending on how you make your sewing stations, if you pierce it, it might not be so much of a problem, but I tend to cut it with a knife, a very sharp knife. You're going to cut into the fold, and you don't want to do that. So all you're going to do, actually for this, I would tip the signature. So I would mark it up, pierce my holes, and then run my tip along the spine fold here. Take my end paper and stand it up. This is hard to see. Knock it up to the head, and then just stand it there and slide it back until the spines are even. And then give it a good press and put it on between boards under a weight to dry. It's about as simple as it can be. You want your tip to be maybe 1 millimeter. If you're really concerned about retaining the integrity of the first signature, you could just wrap a loose guard around the fold, maybe, and just anchor it with 2 dots of adhesive so that it can't go anywhere. Don't glue it to the signature. Just 2 tips. Have it wrap around. What's that? Maybe 2 millimeters on each side, and then you can tip your end sheet to that. And after it's sewn, it will give you a little more. You won't be tipped directly to the outermost leaf. It'll give a little more. Could show a little bit, but that's okay because we're concerned about what happens down the road. So anyway, that's the single folio tipped on for a smallish book, or for, you know, a text block where you've got a new case. It's not huge. If you need to, you can actually do this on a larger book if you add a tube and an extra. What I would do, I'm working on a book now. Once it's glued up, or glue it up, put a piece of Japanese paper, Okawara, that's maybe 1 inch wider on either side. Glue that to the spine of the text block. Then do a tube on top of that. And even on a big book, those 2 things will help take the strain off the end paper section. So that's as far as I'm going to go with this. I will show you how to do the folio and single sheet and the zigzag in the next video. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate everybody who's, checked it out. And if there's any criticisms, anything I can do better, anything you'd like to see, please do let me know, because I'm enjoying doing this, and it's a different way of interacting with folks. So thanks again, and I will be back.